2311 Racing is planning expansion. Kevin Harvick speaks on his retirement decision, and multiple drivers speak on their futures past 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Rudy Bech Development and Construction, as they are returning to Firmware Motorsports in 2023 to sponsor Todd Gillen. They will sponsor Todd Gillen for 5 races in 2023. Great to see Rudy Bech returning to sponsor Todd Gillen. I'm really excited to see what the paint schemes look like, and glad to see that they are going to be returning to the team in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Eunice Storage. As it was announced yesterday that Eunice Storage is going to sponsor Hill Motorsports for 6 races in 2023. The first race, I believe they're playing sponsors out of Daytona or at Atlanta. Great to see Eunice Storage continue to sponsor for Hill Motorsports. They've sponsored Hill Motorsports for the last couple of years. Great to see them continuing their sponsorship. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Island Brands USA. As it was announced yesterday that Island Brands USA is going to sponsor Casgall for 16 Xfinity Series races in 2023 in the number 26 car. The first still sponsor is Daytona. Really great to see Island Brands USA coming in to sponsor Casgall this upcoming season. It's good to see almost a full-time sponsor, more than half of the season. Glad to see a company stepping up to the plate and sponsoring heading into the 2023 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Castrol. As it was announced earlier today that Castrol signed a contract extension as a sponsor with RFK Racing. They're going to sponsor 7-8 races with Brad Keselowski, the first one being Auto Club, and they're going to sponsor Chris Buescher for 3 races in 2023. Castrol's had a multi-year deal so far with the team that started sponsoring, I think, back in 2020 or 2021. So great to see that they will continue to have an affiliation with RFK Racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Generator. As it was announced earlier today that Generator is going to sponsor Todd Gillen for 4 races in 2023. The first race will be the Busch Clash, and after that will be Daytona, and then the race after that will be at the Chicago Street Course. Great to see a new sponsor coming in to sponsor Todd Gillen. Todd Gillen continues to have new sponsors and funding coming into play. Great to see, and excited to see that the Generator will sponsor Todd Gillen this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Phoenix Cup race, as they have a title sponsor. Their title sponsor is going to be called United Rentals Work United 500. I believe the race was last year called United Rentals 500, so they're extending that sponsorship for the 2023 edition, a longer title, and that will be the title for the Phoenix Cup race. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. As it has been officially confirmed that Tyler Reddick is going to be sponsored by Monster Energy in 2023. He will join the list of drivers already sponsored by Monster Energy. This includes Riley Herbst, Haley Deegan, and Ty Gibbs. There have been rumors that Monster Energy was going to be leaving NASCAR in general or leaving 2311 Racing, but it's really good to see that they are going to continue sponsoring the team in 2023 and will continue sponsoring Tyler Reddick throughout the season. Happy to see them coming back. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Celsius. As it was announced earlier this evening that Celsius is going to be sponsoring Corey LaJoie in 2023 for, I believe, 3 or 4 races in 2023, including the 2023 Daytona 500. It's also been confirmed that Bill Barr will not sponsor Corey LaJoie in 2023. Love the look of this car, in my opinion. I think the look looks absolutely incredible of the scheme. The scheme looks fantastic. I'm excited to see it on the track, and glad to see Celsius stepping up to the plate and sponsoring Corey LaJoie this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As we got more of an up-close look at his 2023 cheddar scheme. We kind of seen a little bit of rendering in a Lionel post looking at that cheddar scheme, but now we kind of have official confirmation on what the cheddar's car looks like. I think the cheddar's car looks pretty good in my opinion. I think it's not as good as last year's cheddar's car, don't get me wrong, but I love to see the Cheddar's is going to sponsor Kyle Busch in 2023. I think the car looks pretty solid. It's not spectacular, but I think it looks pretty solid, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this season. It does look pretty solid and does look pretty good. Hopefully he'll have some good runs in that car in 2023 and maybe win those races. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Endeavor. As it was reported by Adam Stern a couple days ago that the SRX raised $8 million from investors, including UFC owner Endeavor. and is now valued at $40 million. The SRX is setting themselves up for a really bright future going forward in 2023. Obviously, they're going to be joining ESPN in 2023 on Thursday nights, and it's already been announced that Julio Castroneves, Kevin Harvick, Clint Bowyer, and Kyle Busch will be racing in the SRX. There's more drivers to be announced. Don Hawk commented to somebody saying the plan is to run about 12 to 15 other drivers this season, which is very, very exciting. And it's also great to see that Endeavor is going to continue sponsoring our SRX going forward as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Bristol Dirt. As the Bristol Dirt and Bristol Motor Speedway tweeted out yesterday that Bristol Dirt has already been officially complete for 2023. Geez, that was really, really quick. Generally, they're not done with Bristol Dirt till like late February, early March. You see that they're already done with Bristol Dirt, probably because they do have a lot more experience now getting Bristol Dirt done than they've had in previous years. That's probably helped them get this done a lot quicker than they have in past years. But it's really great to see that Bristol Dirt's already done, and I'm definitely looking forward to see the race. I'm excited for it, and I cannot wait to see the racing because I think it's going to be some really exciting racing. I thought last year's race was really, really good. It was a controversial event, but I still did enjoy the 2022 edition. I'm looking forward to the 2023 race as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some competition changes. As it was announced a couple days ago that there are some pretty big competition changes that are coming at the heads of NASCAR. Elton Sawyer is going to replace Scott Miller, overseeing NASCAR competition department that is the officiating and everything else at the top. Scott Miller is going to be taking an advisory role in 2023. They also announced a lot of other changes. Don Probst, I think, is moving around as well. But Elton Sawyer will be taking over with Scott Miller's position. NASCAR race control and officiating last year was really, really bad. So I'm hoping in 2023 they can really improve on that. And Elton Sawyer does have some NASCAR experience as well racing in this series. So hoping Elton Sawyer can come in here and do a really good job. I think he has experience being a competition guy who does competition stuff in trucks in the past. So this is nothing new. He's done this in the past. So hopefully his experience can really help him out and help NASCAR do a good job going forward with how they execute these races going forward. Those are some of the competition changes going on in 2023, and those are some of the big changes. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jake Garcia and Taylor Gray. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass late afternoon yesterday, that Jake Garcia and Taylor Gray have both been able to receive playoff waivers. The big reason why both drivers have received playoff waivers is that they do not turn 18 till later this year. Jake Garcia turns 18 on the day of the Las Vegas truck race, and Taylor Gray turns 18 later in the season. If they're able to win the race, they would have a chance of getting in because they're not going to be able to run every single race until they both turn 18 years old. Not a shocker, not a surprise they're going to be getting a playoff waiver. I didn't expect anything to change over there, and not a shock to see both will be getting playoff waivers. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Derek Nealon. As reported by my good buddy Casey Campbell, that Derek Nealon is going to spot for Nick Sanchez in 2023. I believe Derek Nealon will be spotting for Kyle Busch this season in the NASCAR Cup Series, and I can't remember who he's spotting for in the Xfinity Series. I think it's Sheldon Creed, if I'm not mistaken, who he has spotted for in the past, but he'll spot for Nick Sanchez in the Truck Series. This is a really good spotter to have. Derek Nealon's been a veteran spotter for many, many years, so it's a really good decision to bring someone in who does have a lot of experience, who knows what he's doing up on the box. I think he's going to do a really good job, and I expect some great things with Nick Sanchez, as Nick Sanchez looks to have a very strong year in 2023 in the NASCAR Truck Series, looks to win his first ever Truck Series race. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about 3F Racing. Now, I kind of talked about this on the channel yesterday about 3F Racing, and there's been rumors and rumors that 3F Racing have bought the assets from NY Racing. It turns out that's not the case. According to Christopher Tay, who has driven for the team and who will be driving for the team throughout the year in ARCA, I think, or other organizations, he did confirm that they did not buy the assets for NY Racing. Their plan, from what I understand, is that they're looking to debut at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and he's hoping to make some ARCA starts with another team this year as well. It's good to see if NY Racing still is potentially around. Maybe they get Matt DiBenedetto or Greg Biffle an opportunity to drive that car in Cup. Who knows at this point, but I appreciate Christopher Tate coming to me and saying that in my comments section yesterday. I think it's really important we get that information correct. And it's good to see we have confirmation that 3F Racing did not buy the assets of NY Racing, and both organizations are going to be around, so I think it's essential for both parties. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Benjamin Peterson. As it was announced earlier today that Benjamin Peterson is going to drive the 88 for AJ Foyt Racing in 2023. Now, we already knew that Benjamin Peterson was going to be driving for AJ Foyt Racing in 2023. We just didn't know what the number was going to be. We thought it was going to be the number 14 car or the number 4 car, but we now know they'll be driving the number 88 car. Benjamin Peterson is being touted to be a driver who could have a pretty big year in IndyCar. I know AJ Foyt Racing has not been the fastest organization over the last couple of years, but he's being touted to have a really strong year in 2023. Hope we can do that this year because this is going to be a team that looks to improve. They've got a pretty solid organization. I think Dalton Kell's coming back to the team. No, Dalton Kell's no longer at the team, but the team looks to have a very strong year. They look to be much more confident, and hopefully Benjamin Peterson can do a really good job with this team in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the 2023 Rookie of the Year classes for the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. Let's begin by talking about the Cup Series. There's only going to be 2 rookies going for the RT class, and that's Noah Gragson and Ty Gibbs. For the Xfinity Series, you're going to have 2 currently at the moment. Those are Sammy Smith and Parker Retzlaff, though I would anticipate that Chandler Smith will probably get added to that list of drivers who are going for the Rookie of the Year. And for the Truck Series, you're going to have Roger Caruth, Daniel Dye, Nick Sanchez, Jake Garcia, and Brett Holmes. For my prediction for Cup, I think Ty Gibbs wins the Rookie of the Year, but I think it's going to be really close. For Xfinity, I think Sammy Smith will take the cake, but Chandler Smith will be right there because I think Chandler will declare for Rookie of the Year. And for Trucks, I think it's going to be a toss-up between 3 of these drivers, that being Caruth, Dye, and Sanchez. I would give the advantage to Roger Caruth because I think he's going to be in the best equipment, though Daniel Dye will probably be really strong as well throughout the season. These are really strong classes. It's really, really exciting to see, and I'm looking forward to the 2023 season with the Rookie of the Year class. I think it's going to be a really exciting season for sure. Looking forward to the season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IMSA. As it was announced yesterday, the IMSA Ford has officially revealed the drivers who will be in the GT4 class in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge race. These 4 drivers are Zane Smith, Haley Deegan, Harrison Burton, and Ben Rhodes, who will drive that Ford Mustang GT4 car at Daytona this upcoming weekend, I believe. This is not a shock or surprise. Haley Deegan, of course, drove this car last year. Harrison Burton, I believe, drove this car last year. And Ben Rhodes has had experience in this car, though I do believe that he has not driven since he drove for the Fords when he drove Ford Racing. Was a Ford organization back in 2018 and 2019. Zane Smith will be joining to be looking to have a lot of success. This car looks to go out there and win. There's a lot of competition, though, this year. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens and how this team does end up performing. But the IMSA Ford is back, and it's a pretty good caliber of drivers running the event in 2023. If you're a fan of it, you should be looking forward to this upcoming event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stingray Robb. As it was announced a couple days ago that Stingray Robb will drive full-time for Dale Quinn Racing in IndyCar with Rick Ware Racing, partner up with that team in 2023, in the number 51 Rick Ware Racing entry. Stingray Robb has been rumored to potentially go to a couple organizations, including the Dale Quinn brand. Some thought he'd go to the 18 car, but he will go to the 51 car this year. Stingray Robb has a really, really cool name. Plus, I think Stingray Robb does definitely have a lot of talent as well, which I think is really not only going to benefit him, but I think it's going to really help him going into this season. I expect Stingray Robb to be very solid. Dale Quinn Racing showed some promise. David Malukas is going to be a really strong teammate to have. David Malukas nearly won at Worldwide Technology for IndyCar. I wouldn't be shocked if he wins at that track as well this season. But I'm excited to see that Stingray Robb is going to be joining the team, another up-and-coming talent who's got a lot of potential to be successful. And I think Stingray Robb could have a very strong year this year with Rick Ware Racing in IndyCar and also Dale Quinn Racing. I think it's going to be a really strong year for that team. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next stories of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Vargas. As Ryan Vargas has had a couple announcements over the last couple days. Yesterday, it was announced that Ryan Vargas will drive for On Point Motorsports in the Truck Series in the number 30 truck for 7 races in 2023. He'll have different sponsorship and funding, and this will be the first time that Ryan Vargas is going to be behind the wheel of a truck in his NASCAR career up to this point. He's driven Xfinity and has driven, I think, some ARCA races and also ARCA West and East races as well. Now he's getting an opportunity to drive in trucks. In addition to that, it was announced earlier today that Ryan Vargas will be the anchor driver for CHK Racing, which is formerly Mike Harmon Racing. He will drive for CHK Racing's number 74 car in a majority of races in 2023. I'm happy to see that Ryan Vargas is getting more opportunities with both these organizations. I think getting On Point Motorsports equipment is going to be very solid. There have been rumors that On Point Motorsports was not going to be around this year. There was talk that they were going to shut that program down. I am very happy to see that that program is still going to be sticking around, though, in 2023. And also talking about going to CHK Racing. His name had been rumored to potentially be going to this team for a lot of the year. A lot thought he'd be full-time with this team. But it's good to see that he is going to run a majority of the year with the CHK Racing Group. I think he's a very talented driver. I know his performances have not been fantastic, but I do think he's a very talented driver who could get the best out of equipment if the equipment improves, which I think it is going to improve this year with the CHK Racing Group. So I'm excited to see this, and I'm glad to see that Ryan Vargas will have a couple opportunities this year. I think with On Point Motorsports, he gets a couple top 20s, and with CHK Racing, of course, they have to make the show in all those races, which is going to be very tough to do. But the fact I think they're downsizing to one car for the year, I think it's going to be able to help them focus on making those cars really, really good through the season. And I think that we're going to see him do a really good job or do as best he can with CHK Racing this upcoming season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about William Sawalich. As it was announced earlier today that William Sawalich is going to drive the number 1 for Tricon Garage in 2023 and 6 races. This will be, of course, one of the drivers who will be part of that 5-truck organization. They're going to have 5 trucks. Dean Thompson will be full-time in the number 5 truck. You're going to have both the Gray brothers basically driving mostly full-time. And then, of course, you're going to also have Corey Heim joining the team as well. William Sawalich is an up-and-coming talent, only 16 years old, who will be running full-time in ARCA East with Joe Gibbs Racing and racing for a lot of the year in the main ARCA series as well. William's been touted as a really, really strong driver who probably could have, like I said, a very good year this year. I think he is going to have a great year. I really think he's going to have a fantastic year with the team. I would not be surprised or shocked if he gets a win with Tricon Garage. I know that's really high pressure considering that he is only 16 years old, but I think drivers like him can really overcome that pressure and perform very, very well. So I think he's going to have a fantastic year with the team. I think he gets one win. I know those are really bold predictions, and the truck depth of the field is a lot higher than it has been in past years, but I think that he is going to have a good year, and I think he has a great year with the team in 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. As Bob Pockers reported yesterday, the Chicago Street Course that Cup drivers will not be allowed to race in the Xfinity Series race at the Chicago Street Course. However, there will be no restrictions for Cup guys running the Truck Series race at North Wilkesboro. Once again, NASCAR being very inconsistent with how they kind of rule things, because I understand why they're not allowing guys from the Cup Series race in the Xfinity Series races. They want the Xfinity Series guys to have an advantage, and they don't want Cup guys buying up Xfinity Series rides for potentially maybe road course ringers coming in and maybe international drivers who could come in this race as well. But you're telling me you're not allowing that, but you're going to allow the Cup guys to run the truck race at North Wilkesboro? I appreciate the call and I understand what they're doing, but once again, like I mentioned here, they're once again being extremely inconsistent. Again, I understand they don't want to buy rides and have Cup guys buying rides to get experience, but you're allowing the Cup guys to have experience in North Wilkesboro, so why would you not allow them to have experience there? Or maybe just have the Enzo race come there and maybe have them run that event. And honestly, it could make the race a bigger SS, you know what I mean, than it already basically could end up being if they don't get a little bit of experience. So it's a little frustrating. They'll probably get a lot longer practice times to get on track, but knowing NASCAR, they'll probably do their best to not give them as much time. We'll have to wait and see, but at this point, at this time, I get and understand the decision to not let them, but at the same token, same time, I think it would have made a lot more sense for them to give these guys an opportunity to get a little more experience behind the wheel of this car, but that is just my honest opinion. I think giving them more experience makes a lot more sense, but we'll have to see what happens in regards and see if that will affect performance. We'll just have to wait and see what happens in the races. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, Kyle Larson was spoken to by Bob Pockers and asked by Bob Pockers if he actually ended up missing the Chili Bowl and missed racing at the Chili Bowl in 2023. And he actually said no. He thought he was going to get some FOMO for not being at the Chili Bowl in 2023, but he says that he did not miss the Chili Bowl. Now, he did mention in this video, and basically you should go check it out, but he did mention that he did watch the Chili Bowl event. He said he was really happy to see Logan Seavey win, and he thought Logan Seavey, Tanner Thorson, and Kenan McIntosh put on a very, very good show. Now, Kyle Larson, obviously we're talking about this because Kyle Larson, it's no secret that he's been very critical of how the Chili Bowl has been run. So it's good that he enjoyed watching the race. But let's be for real, one of the reasons Kyle Larson did not race in the Chili Bowl is because how long it takes to get the event completed. It took to almost 12:30 Central Standard Time for them to get the race completed. So I can understand the frustration of Kyle Larson basically running the event. They get it done faster, get it done at 9 o'clock. They were done with every race by 9 o'clock. Yes, they didn't have as many drivers showing up, but I understand Kyle Larson's frustration. But it's good to see that he at least watched the Chili Bowl in 2023 and didn't completely ignore it because, again, he had more time to watch it considering it took so long to get done. So he's obviously going to have more time to watch the Chili Bowl because they got their races done by 9 o'clock. Yes, he didn't win, but he plans to be back there in racing at basically the Wild West Shootout in 2024 and not racing at the Chili Bowl. I know that there's a lot of fans who are probably frustrated by that, especially the Chili Bowl fans, but your events got to get done a little bit faster if you want more Cup guys to potentially return in the long-term future. That's just my opinion. It's good that Larson did tune into the race, but it took a long time to get the event done, and I hope in the future, long-term, they can shorten up how long it takes the event to get done, but that's just my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, I want to give a big shout out to Leaf Precision 41 on Twitter because he reported this on his Twitter page. That he says that Jordan Bianchi mentions that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. actually had been having conversations for the 41 car early in the year, but nothing unfortunately materialized. A big reason why I think nothing materialized is because he doesn't have sponsorship and funding. We have to understand that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for the majority of every season, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. does get that Kroger backing. A lot of his sponsors do come from the Kroger chains and the Kroger brands. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., obviously one of the reasons his name had been brought up in the conversations and why his name is being brought up in the conversation as a potential replacement for Kevin Harvick is because of the fact that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a dirt driver. I think he's really good friends with Tony Stewart. And obviously, he has been a driver that a lot of people thought should go to SHR. Plus, he would be, if he gave him pretty good equipment, which I don't think, no disrespect to JTG, they're not the fastest organization in the world. I would think that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would actually perform a lot better at a team like a team like Stewart-Haas Racing than JTG. Plus, he could bring a driver and has a lot of experience. I don't think, though, at this point, though, that he is going to be driving for Stewart-Haas Racing next year because I think they've got their eyes set on putting Ryan Preece in the 4 car and probably putting Cole Custer back in that 41 car, and I think that's what's going to happen with Stewart-Haas Racing. That being said, though, I would love for Stenhouse to get a better opportunity, and I think going to Stewart-Haas Racing would be great. But he also, of course, signed that multi-year contract extension with JTG, though I do believe the second year is an option year, and that 10 car could also be available if Eric Almirola decides to retire at the end of the year. Anything's possible at this point when it comes to this, but interesting that Stenhouse had shown some interest in maybe going to Stewart-Haas Racing. I think if he went to SHR, he would actually be a pretty solid driver, and I think he would do a pretty good job. We'll have to wait and see what happens long term, but it's good to see that Stenhouse showed some interest, and I think Stenhouse could be someone long term to watch long term for maybe free agency, though I do think likely he will stay with JTG for long term because he did sign a multi-year extension with the team, but anything's possible and nothing is guaranteed at this point. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain. Now, it was reported by Bob Pockrass earlier today that Ross Chastain's name has come up when talking about potential drivers for Stewart-Haas Racing and replacing Kevin Harvick. He says he has a home at Trackhouse and hopes for a contract extension. Not only is he a free agent at Trackhouse Racing, but also Daniel Suarez is currently a free agent at the end of the season. One of the big reasons, though, we have, at this point have not seen him re-sign longer extensions is I think they're waiting on the upcoming TV deal. I think it would be a really bad mistake if Justin Marks was to get rid of both Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez. Both Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez have been 2 drivers who performed really good last year in 2022. Ross Chastain picked up his first 2 career Cup Series victories and also made it to the Championship 4 as well. Daniel Suarez picked up his first career victory, made it to the round of 12, and if not for a power steering failure, he would have made it to the round of 8, and you never know. We could have had 2 Trackhouse cars racing in the Championship 4 in 2022. I think it would be a really bad, like I said, I think it would be a really bad call to get rid of both of Suarez and Chastain. If you want my honest opinion, I think I'm like almost 95 to 100% confident that both drivers are going to return. The only way I see Chastain leaving is that 48 car becomes available and he goes to Hendrick, because you're going to have teams wanting Ross Chastain. You're going to have teams like Stewart-Haas Racing are one of them, which would be a downgrade for sure. You have other organizations like Hendrick Motorsports who have shown interest in Ross Chastain, and you've got other teams that definitely want him to come over there. But if you want my honest opinion, I don't think Ross Chastain is going to be leaving Trackhouse Racing. I think he stays long-term, and I'm not expecting any changes going into the season. My prediction, like I said, is Chastain stays in the 1, and Daniel Suarez returns to the 99. Plus, Chastain's got some sponsorship funding backing him. Yes, I know that Trackhouse has a lot of those partners, but I think that some of those partners worked with Ross Chastain last year, including Moose Fraternity. So he does have a little bit of sponsorship funding compared in past years. Plus, I think if you get rid of him, it's just overall going to be a terrible decision for the Trackhouse brand and the organization. So like I said, if you want my bet, I think Ross Chastain is going to stay with Trackhouse Racing long term, but that is just my honest opinion on that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, we kind of talked about this on the channel a couple days ago, but I want to do a little bit more of a follow-up. As Bob Pockers can continue talking about the situation with Alex Bowman, he says, Alex Bowman says talks have started about a contract extension and beyond 2023, and thinks there's no concerns on health. He did say that he had some jokes with Blake Harris about that after his crashes at the Chili Bowl, and also I think earlier in the year and late at Phoenix as well, which he says his health is not a concern. Like I just mentioned, though, Alex Bowman is in a contract year with Hendrick Motorsports. Now, if you wanted my honest opinion, I am very confident that Alex Bowman will probably return to Hendrick Motorsports likely in 2024. But there could be a factor that could change things, and it all depends on Ally. Ally has been a full season sponsor for Alex Bowman for the last couple years, since 2021. Basically, since 2021, he went over to the 48 car. He's had Ally as a sponsorship. And you look at the other three drivers at Hendrick Motorsports. William Byron has a contract through 2025. Kyle Larson, he has a contract through 2026. And Chase Elliott has a contract through 2027. So Alex Bowman is the only driver at Hendrick Motorsports right now that I don't think they're looking at completely right now at like being the future of the organization. William Byron is an up-and-coming talent, and he's been doing really, really great with Hendrick Motorsports. Obviously, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott won championships, and they're drivers who are going to stay long-term. The big question mark for Hendrick Motorsports is past 2023 if Alex Bowman returns. If you wanted my honest opinion, I think he likely stays at Hendrick Motorsports. I would actually give it about an 85 to 90% likely. The thing that will change things, though, and will change the game in a pretty big way, is if Ally leaves. If Ally leaves Hendrick Motorsports at the end of this year completely, or they significantly drop their sponsorship, they may be issues for Alex Bowman. The big benefit, though, for Alex Bowman, though, is that there's not a lot of big-name free agents that are signed. Most of them have already signed multi-year deals with their organizations this past year, so I don't see any issues coming up to play. I expect Alex Bowman that he is going to return to Hendrick Motorsports next year, but nothing's guaranteed at this point, and anything could change. But I think likely at this point they're going to get the talks through. I think it's going to take a couple months for things to be announced, but I think if you want my prediction on how long the contract will be with Hendrick Motorsports, I think it's going to be another 2 to 3 year extension where it goes through 2026, which by that point I think Alex Bowman will be about 32 to 33 years old. And I think that he's also going to have a pretty good year this year as well. If his performance is really good, that's going to convince Ally to get on and basically extend him long-term much earlier. If you want my prediction, though, I think he gets a long-term extension with Hendrick Motorsports at least for 2 or 3 years. And I think his performance with Blake Harris coming in as a crew chief, I think is really going to play a factor. I predict he gets a long-term extension with Hendrick Motorsports for the next couple of years. But that is just my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, we also discussed this on the channel a couple days ago as well, but Denny Hamlin spoke to the media at production days, including Bob Pockers, and Denny Hamlin says that he is very, very confident that he will return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, and they have begun starting talks as well. Now, Denny Hamlin does mention, speaking to Bob Pockers, that it is going to take a few months for the deal to likely get done, to get things done. Denny Hamlin, like Alex Bowman, is in a contract year. And a big key thing that could keep Denny Hamlin staying at the team will be FedEx. FedEx, there's been a lot of talk about that company being in a lot of jeopardy, and there's a lot of issues with the company where they're basically going to be cutting back a lot of their money and doing a bunch of pay cuts as well, which could affect NASCAR as well. Here's a big thing, though, for Denny Hamlin. Even if FedEx leaves and they kind of drop a little bit of their sponsorship, I'm more confident with him staying at Joe Gibbs Racing a little bit more now than Alex Bowman, though I'm still somewhat a little more confident in some essence than with Bowman, than Denny Hamlin returning to Joe Gibbs Racing. But here's the thing. This is not like last year with Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch obviously basically got kicked from the curb from Joe Gibbs Racing because he didn't have sponsorship and funding. They had Oracle, and he got put down to RCR. There's a difference, though. Quintessentially, what's going on is that Denny Hamlin owns 2311 Racing, which we're going to get back to here in just a little bit. But 2311 Racing is a Toyota team, and they use Joe Gibbs Racing stuff. So Denny Hamlin, if he does get kicked from Joe Gibbs Racing, which I think is very unlikely at this point, he would still have a ride to end up going to, and he would go over and drive for his own 2311 Racing team. But anything's possible at this point. Now, another big question to talk about is how long the deal will be if Denny is to return. I don't think it's going to be a long-term deal, and here's why. By the end of 2023, Denny Hamlin is going to be 43 years of age. So if he signs like a 2 or 3 year deal, he's going to be in his mid-40s or in his upper 40s, and we've seen a lot of drivers retire around that 43 to 45-year-old range. So I think at this point that Denny Hamlin will get about a 1 or 2 year deal. My prediction for his retirement will be around 2025 or 2026. It'll be about 45 to 46 at the time, and will be a much older driver. So I think Denny Hamlin does get an extension. Don't worry if you're a Denny Hamlin fan. I think he will get a multi-year extension, even if FedEx drops some of their sponsorship significantly. Now, if FedEx completely leaves Joe Gibbs Racing, then you have to kind of raise red flags. But if you want my opinion, I think it's very likely, and it's pretty safe to say that I think that you're going to get an extension with that team. I think that's what happens going into the future. I think Denny Hamlin is going to get an extension with Joe Gibbs Racing, and I think he'll do as good a job as he can with the team. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I think Denny Hamlin is going to get a multi-year extension, a 2 to 3 year extension, and Hamlin continues driving for the team in 2023 and long-term with Joe Gibbs Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we are talking about Kevin Harvick. As everybody knows, at this point, Kevin Harvick is going to retire at the end of the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series season. After being in the NASCAR Cup Series since 2001 and basically being in the Cup Series or racing in NASCAR in general since 1995, Kevin Harvick is going to retire at the end of the season. And there have been some interesting speculation of one of the reasons many people believe that Kevin Harvick did decide to retire is because of the next-gen car. Bob Poggers actually asked about that speculation, and Kevin Harvick actually says that the car did not play a factor in Kevin Harvick deciding to retire. A couple years ago, Kevin Harvick said he's been kind of thinking about this really for the last 5 years, and Kevin Harvick nearly retired at the end of the 2021 season. People forget this, but Kevin Harvick actually was initially going to retire at the end of 2021, as he talked on the Dale Jr. Download about this a couple years ago. In fact, talked about this last year in 2022, that he wasn't supposed to continue racing past 2021 season, but he spoke to a couple people, and that was a big determining factor why he is going to continue driving at least through 2023, but will retire at the end of the season. He also talked about how the fact that communication NASCAR has actually improved over the last 6 months, and he thinks things are getting better, which is absolutely great to see. The communication NASCAR has definitely improved in a pretty big way, considering a lot of drivers have been really frustrated with NASCAR's communication. I think that's why we're seeing also something we'll talk about a second ago that is actually happening. But Kevin Harvick, he's been in the sport now for a very long time. Kevin Harvick is the oldest full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver. He's 47 years old, and by the end of 2023, he's going to be 48. Kevin Harvick also kind of explained this a couple of months ago, but basically he said a couple weeks ago when this was officially announced, that one of the other reasons why he decided to retire is because of the fact he's basically got kids. Keelan, he's 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, and Keelan's getting a little bit older, and Keelan, he's beginning a racing career racing go-karts in Europe, and Kevin said that was a big reason why he decided to retire. And also Piper, she's 5 years old, and she's getting at the racetrack a lot more as well, and he wants to be there for his family as well. And I think it's a good thing, at least, that Kevin wants to be, with his family a lot more going into 2000 and long term. And, Kevin has said that he wants to be, of course, in the Fox Sports booth, which, of course, he's talked about that in the past. In fact, there's a lot of talk that Kevin is actually going to go in the Fox Sports booth and be in the Cup Series booth on a full-time basis in 2024. Talk is rather they're still going to continue doing the rotation booth in 2023. But in 2024, they'll go with Kevin Hart being full-time, probably Clint Boyer being there, and also Mike Joy still being lead commentator, but maybe the last year Mike Joy would be the lead commentator. And Kevin Harvick, talking about his retirement, going back to that, Kevin Harvick absolutely has earned this retirement. He's done a lot of NASCAR Cup Series competition. Kevin Harvick's won a Cup Series championship, 60 Cup Series races, and maybe more before it's all said and done. He has won the Coke 600 a couple times, won a Daytona 500, won 3 Brickyard 400s, won the Southern 500 twice, won a lot of races in his career, and has accomplished a lot of big things. And he's also won 2 Xfinity Series championships. If there's a driver who definitely has deserved a retirement for a long time, he's definitely deserving of this after all of his accomplishments he's done, it's definitely Kevin Harvick. And Kevin Harvick, unlike other drivers like a Matt Kenseth in a sense for 2017, Kevin Harvick is going out on his own terms and being able to do what he wants to do and finish his career on his own terms. And, of course, he's going to be racing the SRX in a couple races this year and will also be one of the co-owners of the Cars Late Model Tour, which will be able to work with that as well. I think it's just super exciting. Well, it's disappointing that this is going to be the last year for Kevin Harvick. He's done a lot of great things. And speaking on retirement, I mean, he's earned a retirement 100% in my opinion, because he's accomplished a lot in the sport and he's earned it, and he's done a lot of great things for NASCAR in general, and he's going to 100% be a first ballot Hall of Famer in the NASCAR Cup Series. So I know it's disappointing this is going to be the last year for Kevin Harvick, but it's good to see that he speaks on that retirement going into next year, and I think he's accomplished a lot, and I think he'll be able to accomplish a lot more off the track in the future. And hey, maybe just maybe long term, he'll be able to basically bring in, basically bring back KHI and basically bring them as a Cup Series team maybe in the future. Maybe that's a pipe dream, but anything's possible. And then you think about who potentially could replace him. I think that's going to be Ryan Preece going into next year, honestly, with him being a KHI managed driver, plus being a driver at Stewart-Haas Racing currently at the moment. I would have to think that at this particular point that we're going to see him driving that car next year and moving to the 4, and then probably Cole Custer going to the 41 cars. So Kevin Harvick speaking on his retirement, basically his thoughts on retirement, and it's interesting, and we'll see what happens to see if he can have a very successful final season in the NASCAR Cup Series. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about 2311 Racing. Now, we kind of talked about this on the channel a couple days ago about 2311 Racing, but I kind of wanted to expand on the 2311 Racing news because I think it's actually a lot bigger than people realizes. So over the last couple of years, there's been talks and rumblings and rumors that 2311 Racing has been wanting to expand. They've obviously already expanded in the last year or two. In 2021, they were just a one-car team of Bubba Wallace. In 2022, 2311 Racing was a two-car team with Kurt Busch, who was supposed to run full-time, but then he got injured throughout the season and concussion-like symptoms and won't be full-time. And then, of course, Bubba Wallace in the 23 and at points the 45 car. In 2023, 2311 Racing will have two full-time entries, Bubba Wallace in the 23 and Tyler Reddick in the 45. And then you're going to see Travis Pastrana drive the 67 and probably Kurt Busch, maybe a couple other drivers, maybe somehow Carl Edwards gets an opportunity, but we'll see him driving that car. And very recently, it was reported that basically Denny Hamlin spoke to Bob and said they're trying to plan a third car to get maybe Kurt Busch ready in case he decides to run throughout the year. And that's why they've got Travis Pastrana coming in, plus Travis Pastrana is going to have Black Rifle Coffee. In addition to that, it was reported as well that 2311 Racing is officially going to be building their new HQ. Now, Denny Hamlin has said that with the TV talks that they basically were putting a lot of this stuff on hold until things basically were kind of went through. But it sounds like maybe TV talks are getting a lot better because the fact that they're getting that HQ worked on, they're supposed to be starting that, I think, that next week. And the goal is to have the new HQ done before 2024 and hoping to have it done by 2024 season when that begins, which is going to be a little bit of a stretch since we're already in the beginning of 2023. But anything's possible and things could get done. Denny Hamlin's also publicly said in the past that he wants 2311 Racing to eventually be a 3 or 4 car organization. So talk about the future of 2311 Racing and their future expansion endeavors. What drivers could we see 2311 pick up maybe for 2024, maybe on a full-time basis? Because I think they may run this car part-time. It's possible that Kurt Busch still makes some starts maybe in 2024, but I think 2023 is going to be the last year for Kurt Busch. What drivers could be possible? You've got some drivers in the lower series. Obviously, John Hunter Nemechek. He drives for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and he actually did drive for 2311 Racing, so he could potentially be a candidate for maybe a full third-time car in 2024. Of course, they got to get a charter for that, but you would think that they're going to try to get a third charter to race that car. So John Hunter could still possibly race in 2023, but could race in 2024, but he could still go to Joe Gibbs Racing as well if one of those rides become available. What about Sammy Smith? I know Sammy Smith doesn't have a lot of experience in Xfinity, but Sammy Smith does bring sponsorship funding from Pilot Flying J and those companies as well, very similar to Michael and Ned have. Could that possibly be the case? Who knows? That could be a possible driver. What about other drivers that could be free agents? What about Alex Bowman? If Bowman leaves Hendrick Motorsports, so I'm confident he return, would he be a potential candidate for the ride? That could be possible. What about some of the other drivers? What about other drivers like maybe a Trevor Bayne perhaps comes back and drives full-time for 2311 Racing? What do they bring maybe somehow Matt Kenseth back? Who knows at this particular point what they're going to do? But 2311 Racing, they have long-term ambitions and they have long-term goals, and they want to eventually be a 3 or 4 car team. And it's good to see that they are working on that HQ to get things prepared for the long-term future, because 2311 Racing, I think it really is not a stretch to say in the next few years, while right now that Joe Gibbs Racing is the top Toyota team. It would not shock or surprise me long-term if 2311 Racing does become the top team in the Toyota pipeline, because we know that Joe Gibbs Racing's having some trouble with some of their contracts and stuff, with sponsorship issues and stuff. M&M's left, FedEx a little bit in jeopardy, though we think they'll come back in some sort of capacity. And of course, Mark Truex Jr., his future's in question. And you've got a lot of young drivers. Ty Gibbs, of course, he's only, 20 years old and going to be 21 at some point this year. I think in July he turns 21. But he's probably going to struggle in his first year. And I think really right now the future is Christopher Bell. But you're probably going to have some drivers going there. Toyota's going to be in a very interesting position in the next few years, because they might become, we may have a new power shift when it comes to the Toyota pipeline. And like I said, it would not shock or surprise me if we do see 2311 Racing eventually become the big Toyota team. But I think they're setting themselves up for a great future. I think eventually Denny Hamlin will transition over to 2311 Racing, whether that is being a driver, or whether that is being owner of the team. He's already, of course, owner of the organization, but eventually I think he could run for his own team before the end of his career. And I think he might finish his career by driving for 2311 Racing and not driving for Joe Gibbs Racing. But anything's possible at this point, and, things can change. 2311 Racing may, who knows, shut down, but I don't see that happening. I think you look at the two drivers at the team currently. You've got Bubba Wallace, who has done an incredible job in these last couple years, and I expect in 2023 that he is going to have a multi-win season. And then, of course, Tyler Reddick, coming in his first year with 2311, had a pretty big year this past year with Richard Childress Racing in 2022, scoring 3 victories. He wasn't supposed to join the team until 2024, but then, of course, all things changed when Kurt announced retirement from full-time competition, though Kurt could still race this year. We're still waiting on that, but Reddick's coming into the team. This team is setting themselves up for a really bright future going forward, and I think if you're a 2311 Racing fan, you've got to be extremely excited. I expect this team to continue to not only improve, to show continued growth as an organization. They're not only getting better, but the team is getting bigger, they're getting better, and they're getting stronger as well. And I expect this team to continue to improve as an organization. But it's also exciting to see that 2311 Racing is continuing to talk about expansion, because expansion, I think, is very important, and I think this team could expand in 2024. So that is going to be for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on, to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go jump over that and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about 2311 Racing potentially expanding? Do you think they are going to expand in 2024 full-time with 3 full-time cars or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed today on today's episode, including all the contract talks and Kevin Harvick speaking out about his retirement? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to be having an updated 2024 NASCAR Silly Season predictions on the channel. Then on Sunday, I'm either going to have the Xfinity Series lineup for 2023 and everything we know that has been officially confirmed, or will be the Truck Series lineup. Who knows at this point, but there will be a lineup video coming out on Sunday as well. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.